Welcome to The Debate. So today we're grappling with something with a truly profound global fallout. That is Operation Absolute Resolve, the 2026 U.S. military action that ended with the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores, and well, their transfer to New York to face federal charges.
And this action, it really is one of the most significant challenges to international governance we've seen in decades. It forces us to confront the very boundaries of state sovereignty when a powerful nation decides to act as its own global policeman.
Precisely. And that brings us to the immediate and specific question before us today. Did the capture of Nicolas Maduro primarily serve as a necessary, if unilateral, enforcement of criminal accountability, or did it constitute an illegal act of state aggression that fundamentally undermined international law? I'm going to argue that this was a legitimate law enforcement action, one necessary to finally achieve some accountability.
And I'll contend that this was a profound breach of sovereignty and international norms. It's an act of aggression that I think cannot be retroactively justified by the criminality of the person targeted.
Right. So my position here is that the action was fundamentally justified as an application of U.S. domestic law. It was filling a vacuum that was left by failed international mechanisms. I mean, Maduro wasn't just some political rival. He was a legally indicted fugitive. He was facing longstanding federal narco-terrorism and weapons charges in the U.S. Southern District of New York. And while the operation certainly had massive military support, the administration's framing and the execution itself was explicitly defined as a law enforcement action. You can see that in the involvement of Department of Justice agencies like the FBI's hostage rescue team, whose entire purpose was to formally execute the arrest warrants.
I acknowledge the internal U.S. legal justification, I do. But that domestic framing just cannot legitimize a military invasion of a sovereign nation. I mean, the core problem is that international law experts universally condemned the operation. They stated, quite unequivocally, that it violated Article 2.4 of the UN Charter, which is the cornerstone prohibition on the use of force, and it therefore qualified as a crime of aggression. And crucially, it lacked authorization by the UN Security Council, and experts found, and I'm quoting here, no evidence whatsoever to justify it as a measure of self-defense.
But we have to look at the context here. The international mechanisms had failed. The U.S. isn't a party to the Rome Statute, and the limitations of ICC warrants are, well, they're clear for everyone to see. We see this inadequacy all the time. Look at the continued international travel of other indicted leaders like Benjamin Netanyahu or Vladimir Putin, who face zero consequences when they visit non-member states. So when multilateral avenues prove totally ineffective against a head of state accused of running an organized crime syndicate, unilateral action rooted in clear domestic jurisdiction becomes the only realistic path to justice.
I understand the frustration with the ICC's limitations, I really do. But the failure of one multilateral body doesn't just automatically grant the strongest nation license to disregard the entire system of sovereignty. The operation was a violent, direct violation of Venezuela's sovereignty. It was, quite rightly, denounced by Caracas as a kidnapping and imperialist aggression. Critics characterize this type of action as latter-day imperialism, and they warned that prioritizing one nation's domestic arrest warrant over the entire established international legal order sets a tremendously dangerous precedent for global stability.
Okay, then let's get into the specific rationale. You call it imperialism, but the central publicly stated rationale was anti-narcoterrorism. The U.S. goal was transparently focused on disrupting major drug trade routes. The administration had designated key Venezuelan drug gangs, including the Cartel of the Suns, which Maduro allegedly led, and Tren de Aragua, as foreign terrorist organizations. This consistent focus on prosecuting a regime they described as a narco state, which was reinforced by that maritime blockade just before the raid, it all signals an effort to combat a very active organized crime threat against U.S. interests.
I find that official narrative selective at best. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the primary engine driving an operation of this scale was purely disrupting drug routes. The motivation involving Venezuela's vast oil reserves, the world's largest proven reserves, was explicit. It was highly publicized by the administration itself. President Trump actually said he intended to run Venezuela and have U.S. companies invest billions to fix the badly broken infrastructure and reclaim stolen oil assets. So while drug disruption was a factor, sure, the promise of oil revenue to reimburse the U.S. for the massive operational costs, it just reinforces the analysis that the true core objective was control over energy, mineral, and natural resources.
That's a compelling point regarding the resource motivation, and I would agree that economic factors were certainly in play. But let's get back to the legal reality of the accountability that was achieved. The efficacy of U.S. federal jurisdiction relies solely on the defendant's custody. The case is now proceeding in a Manhattan federal court where Maduro and Flores have been arraigned and have entered pleas. The assertion of domestic legal authority remains valid, precisely because custody was obtained. Enforcement depends entirely on physical presence in the courtroom, not on international consensus about how they got there.
You're focusing very narrowly on the trial itself, and you're glossing over the severity of the means used to achieve that custody. While I agree the U.S. court system must proceed once a defendant is there, the legitimacy of that acquisition it's fundamentally tainted by the sheer scale of the military violence used. This was no ordinary arrest. Using a domestic indictment, the U.S. justified a massive military incursion with over 150 aircraft, the deployment of Delta Force, and strikes that demonstrably damaged infrastructure, including the electrical grid and civilian complexes. The human cost was devastating. We know 80 people were killed, including at least one 80-year-old woman in her own apartment. That level of force, used to forcibly remove a sitting leader from sovereign territory, undermines the foundational international legal order more than any potential trial benefit could possibly justify.
I see why you emphasize the human cost and the military scale, and those are, of course, serious considerations. Let me offer a different perspective on the strategic implications, though. This action, regardless of the controversy around the legal means, it achieved immediate, tangible accountability against a dangerous criminal actor who was destabilizing the entire hemisphere. It showed a robust commitment to Trump's 2025 national security strategy and signaled a global reestablishment of deterrence. And the technical success is a key part of the argument. The operation was executed swiftly in just a matter of hours, with stunning competence and minimal U.S. casualties. So when multilateral frameworks are simply incapable of holding actors accountable, this kind of robust unilateralism can force necessary change.
That technical success is undeniable, but the key question is about the strategic liability and the long-term cost of eroding these norms. The International Crisis Group's analysis disputed that the operation was even a success as a true regime change, noting the government remained largely intact. Delcy Rodriguez was sworn in as acting president within hours, and the hardliners kept their key ministerial posts. The core structure just adapted very quickly, so the greater cost is the erosion of global norms. Analysts are already warning that this unilateral action provides a chilling political and legal precedent for aggressive moves by other major powers. For example, the risk of influence on China regarding Taiwan or Russia's calculations toward Ukraine. When the strongest power explicitly violates the UN Charter, the entire global system is weakened for what seems to be a very questionable strategic gain.
We return then to this tension between necessity and legality. We successfully removed and subjected a major criminal actor to legal accountability in Manhattan, demonstrating a powerful commitment to law enforcement despite the manifest limitations and flaws of the multilateral frameworks that exist.
And I re-emphasize that the U.S. acted outside the bounds of international law, setting a grave precedent that fundamentally risks global stability. The regime structure in Caracas shifted power, but it remains functionally intact, which means the immense cost to international norms may not even yield the desired long-term strategic results.
The debate over Operation Absolute Resolve powerfully highlights the tension between domestic imperatives, law enforcement, resource interests, security, and the fragile structure of international law and state sovereignty in the 21st century.
Indeed. And this operation leaves us to grapple with a really fundamental question. When does prosecuting a criminal, however powerful they may be, morph into an undeniable act of aggression against a sovereign state? The answer will define the future balance of power and the stability of the international legal order.
We invite our listeners to reflect on the deep implications of this action for international governance.